Hi there, welcome to another new video from New Formula News. In this video, we need to talk about the highlights and lowlights of Jeddah this weekend. The attitude of Max Verstappen is being heavily criticized. Is this fair? Does Hamilton acknowledge the downfall of Mercedes? And why does Perez want an internal investigation? You'll see it all in this video. But before we begin, we'd like to ask you to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any updates. Done? Let's get started. Lewis Hamilton was in awe in Jeddah when Max Verstappen raced past him at full speed. He had never seen the Red Bull cars be so fast compared to the rest. The Formula One Grand Prix of Saudi Arabia was dominated by Red Bull, just like in Bahrain. Sergio Perez could claim victory from pole position, and Max Verstappen finished second despite starting from 15th place. The gap to third place, Fernando Alonso, was over 15 seconds. Meanwhile, Mercedes had to settle for fourth place for George Russell and fifth place for Lewis Hamilton. It was briefly uncertain whether Russell would still get a podium place, but after the race, Alonso retained his third place despite a penalty. Russell and Hamilton couldn't compete with Red Bull anyway, as the seven-time world champion observed after the race. "I don't think I've ever seen a car that fasts," said Hamilton. Mercedes has been very dominant in recent years, but according to the Brit, it doesn't come close to what Red Bull showed in Jeddah. "I don't think we've ever been that fast. They had the fastest car I've seen, especially compared to the rest." For Hamilton, it became clear how fast Red Bull was when Verstappen overtook him during the race. "I didn't even bother to defend, because the speed difference was enormous," said the Mercedes driver. Honest from Hamilton. But what does this mean for Mercedes? In recent years, it has always been exciting between Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari. But the roles seem to have changed, and with Hamilton's statement, Mercedes seems to be acknowledging their own downfall. Max Verstappen is of course happy with his comeback in Saudi Arabia, but with a trouble-free weekend, he should have won, according to him. Red Bull scored a dominant 1-2 finish in Saudi Arabia, just like the previous race weekend. This time, it was not Max Verstappen on the top step of the podium, but teammate Sergio Perez. Verstappen did set the fastest lap, however, which means that the gap between the two in the standings is only 1 point in favor of the Dutchman. It was a great achievement for Verstappen to go from 15th on the grid to second place, but he remains humble about it, saying, "We were a little helped by the safety car, which made it easier to get to second place." He found it difficult in the early laps due to traffic on the Jeddah Corniche circuit, but once he got past it, he was able to drive better. After that, it was doable. In the end, the gap was just over 5 seconds and I closed it, but it wasn't enough to attack. However, it should have been an easier weekend. After problems in qualifying, it became a race to catch up rather than starting from the front row. There were also some issues with Verstappen's Red Bull during the race. It was a little bit of the same problem with the drive shaft, but it didn't break this time. You just feel a lot of vibrations and some strange things with the balance. Verstappen said that finishing in second place with the fastest lap was good damage control. "I had a terrible day yesterday, so when you're in second place, you want to take that extra point. We just have to be better as a team and not have these problems, then it would have been a whole different race for me. We limited the damage, but we should have won here." Sergio Perez lost the virtual lead in the Formula One standings to Max Verstappen in the last lap of the Saudi Arabian GP, when the Dutchman took the fastest lap and thus won championship point from him. The Mexican was surprised and wants Red Bull to analyze the situation internally. Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen were the only two drivers who could have won the Saudi Arabian GP. However, since Verstappen had to come from behind, he could never really challenge Perez. With a few laps to go, Verstappen settled for second place. Red Bull instructed its drivers to manage their pace and set laps of 1:33. At that point, Perez had the fastest laps, but Verstappen wanted to change that. In the very last lap, Verstappen pushed for the fastest lap and got it, earning him an extra championship point, much to Perez's frustration. The Mexican was under the impression that his teammate was not going to attempt to set the fastest lap. Therefore, Perez wants Red Bull to investigate why he received different information than Verstappen. 2 laps before the end, I asked the team about the fastest lap, while I was told to hold a certain pace. That's why I assumed that Verstappen was told the same thing. We need to investigate the situation thoroughly because I clearly received different information, which prevented me from pushing," said the Mexican. Afterwards, it wasn't just the confrontation with Checo that was being talked about at Red Bull. The recurring issues with the RB19 were also a topic of discussion. In the final phase of the race, Verstappen once again felt vibrations at the rear of his RB19. The Dutchman reported the problems over the onboard radio to his race engineer, Jean-Pierre Lambias. There seems to be no explanation yet for the vibrations. However, it is clear that even the extremely fast Red Bull is not exempt from reliability issues this season. Verstappen started the race from P15 on Sunday, as he broke his drive shaft during Q2 in qualifying on Saturday and could no longer continue the session. The gears also proved to be a pain point in Bahrain and during preparations in Jeddah. At the end of the race, things also didn't feel good on board Verstappen's car. Marco only said about it, "We still have to look at where the vibrations come from." However, the Austrian doesn't seem to be worried about the vibrations on board the RB19 and nuances the situation. Marco said, "If you can eventually still set the fastest lap, it may not have been such an acute problem. We obviously thoroughly examine every problem that arises." Verstappen managed to brace himself during or after the problems and take the fastest lap in the final lap. According to Peter Windsor, it was noticeable how Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen of Red Bull Racing were increasing pressure on each other during the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. According to the F1 expert, this was not necessary for the dominant team. Red Bull was already relatively quickly in a 1-2 position in the race. Verstappen started from P15 and drove calmly forward. The first virtual safety car ensured that he was back in the running for a potential podium from P4 at the restart. When Verstappen was 5 seconds behind Perez on P2, the two drivers gave it their all and easily drove away from third-place Fernando Alonso. Was this an unnecessary fight between Verstappen and Perez? According to Windsor, this was a remarkable moment. The two Red Bull drivers seemed to put each other under pressure and asked too much of the car. Windsor said in a post-race analysis on YouTube, when they were 10 seconds ahead, they could take it easy. But they didn't. Every time Verstappen did a very good lap, Sergio responded to it. The Brit thought of Red Bull's situation during the 2022 race in Brazil. Then Verstappen ignored the team orders to let Perez pass. Windsor wouldn't want to be in the race engineer's shoes. That's not what you want when you have a comfortable 1-2. If I had been on the pit wall, I would have been nervous and quite irritated that they were pushing each other like that. Nico Rosberg also criticized Max Verstappen's attitude at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. The analyst judged after the race that Verstappen's attitude is not good for the team's dynamics. After the race, Verstappen was far from satisfied with the result. In an interview with Viaplay, the Dutchman mentioned that he would have preferred to win. According to Rosberg, this is not a good attitude. The 2016 world champion criticized Verstappen's words in a post-race analysis with Sky Sports. "You don't want to see this," Rosberg analyzes. Apparently, he also skipped the team meeting on Saturday. "I don't think it's a good attitude so early in the season, especially when the team is doing so incredibly well and working so hard. He should be more grateful." What do you think? Is it fair to criticize Max's attitude? And was the information Kiko received from the team the reason why this important point went to Max? What would be Red Bull's consideration in this regard? Leave your comment and continue talking with us. We thank you for watching and hope to see you again in the next video.